Kia ora koutou, and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for this very important and timely public lecture. My name is Emma Shields and I'm the Evidence and Insights Lead at the Cancer Society of New Zealand, and I will be your host today. I will firstly open us up with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa punamu te moana, hei huarari mō tātou I te rangi nei, homie huie taikie. So today we're all here because we care deeply about the health and well-being of our loved ones, our whānau, our friends, our communities, and yet alcohol continues to cause significant harm to the people we care about most. And what many people don't realise, or perhaps aren't told, is that alcohol is a proven cause of many types of cancer, including breast and bowel cancer. And the evidence is clear: the less alcohol we drink, the lower our cancer risk. And while many New Zealanders already agree that we'd be better off with less alcohol in our lives, the reality we face tells a different story. Alcohol is everywhere, marketed aggressively in our neighbourhoods, near our schools and our sports clubs, making it really difficult to avoid its influence or its harms. And so today we have the privilege of hearing from three leading experts who will help us better understand the reality of alcohol harm in Aotearoa. They'll shine a light on the links between alcohol and cancer, on our alcogenic environments, and what measures we can take to reduce alcohol harm. So please join me in welcoming Emeritus Professor Jennie Connor from the University of Otago, Associate Professor Taisia Huckle from Massey University, and Sarah Sneyd, Senior Health Promotion Advisor at Alcohol Health Watch. Together they bring a wealth of knowledge, evidence and insights to a conversation that's long overdue. We will have time for questions at the end, so please pop those into a Q&A box as we go along, and then I can then put them to our panellists. So firstly, let's begin with Professor Jennie Connor. Jennie, over to you.
Thanks very much, Emma. I'm going to start talking about drinking alcohol, because there are some things we need to know about alcohol before we can understand what's going on with cancer. So harm to drinkers of alcohol is caused by both the nature of alcohol itself and the way we drink it. And ethanol, which is the alcohol in all of our alcoholic drinks, is intoxicating, it's toxic, it's carcinogenic, it's addictive, and it's legal, which is not so much a property of the alcohol as a property of the way we view it. Most people drink for some level of intoxication. So for light drinkers, it's often for the relaxation and sociability. And for binge drinkers, it might be the enjoyment from heavier intoxication and the disinhibition that it causes. And this much is familiar to most of us because we live with it all the time. But alcohol is also toxic, especially to the liver where it's processed. And it's a neurotoxin, meaning it can affect the nervous system. For example, with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder in children of drinking mothers. As well as being directly poisonous, alcohol is carcinogenic, and this means it can lead to a range of cancers. It can cause cancer, which is our focus today. And for those who become addicted to alcohol, it's a difficult task to escape from the drinking and from the health consequences that follow. The legal status of alcohol compared with other drugs is important. It's not really a property of alcohol, but of the way we handle alcohol in our society. And it misleads people to thinking that alcohol is not seriously harmful and we can buy it with our groceries. These properties of alcohol make it potentially unsafe. And because of that, we regulate alcohol, as many countries do. But the amount of harm depends on how much we drink and how we drink it. So the way people drink can be described by the average volume that they drink and the pattern. And by volume, we mean not the number of glasses, but the amount of alcohol in total. There are two different ways of drinking 2 bottles of wine a week. The outcomes are likely to be different because if you drink it all at the same time, there are risks of heavy intoxication on top of the risks of the amount of alcohol per se. The same volume of alcohol, but a different pattern. Now, research has clearly shown us that for most cancers caused by alcohol, it's the total amount of alcohol you drink that increases risk, regardless of the pattern. And so and whether it's also regardless of whether it's in the form of spirits, wine, beer, or something else. So the number of standard drinks that you see on the labels of alcohol containers tells you how much pure alcohol is in each bottle or can, how many standard drinks. In New Zealand, virtually everyone drinks. 3/4 of the population are over 14 years of age, have drunk alcohol in the past year, and 1 out of 6 adults has a hazardous drinking pattern. But there's little difference between men and women in whether they drink or not, but more men than women have a hazardous drinking pattern. Chronic effects such as cancer don't depend on the pattern, but hazardous drinkers also often drink a large amount of alcohol, which is what's going to be a problem. So the trend in current drinkers in New Zealand has been very flat. It's been very constant over a long period of time, and just recently there's been a bit of a drop in hazardous drinking amongst the youngest group, 15 to 25-year-olds, over the last 5 years. Okay, so this graphic here is showing information from the most recent assessment of the amount of harm from alcohol in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's an estimate of the number of deaths that would have been avoided if no one drank any alcohol. In the year assessed, which was 2018, there were 901 deaths, and this is actually fairly consistent with the previous studies from earlier years, and that's because no action has been taken to change the situation. I think what's stunning about this picture is that more than 40% of all the deaths that were attributable to alcohol in that year were from cancer. So that's 376 cancer deaths from alcohol in 1 year, and roughly that many in every year. We can imagine the ways in which 1/3 of all alcohol deaths could be from injuries. There are lots of kinds of injuries, lots of situations where injuries occur, but many people don't even know that alcohol can cause cancer. And as well as these deaths, there were 1,250 new alcohol-related cancer diagnoses in that year. So this illustration shows the sites of the cancers that we know are more likely in people who drink alcohol based on international research. We know that there are other types of cancers that may also be increased by drinking, but there's less certain evidence of that at the moment. In the graph, each line represents one of those 5 sites shown in the picture of the person holding the bottle. And it shows how much the risk goes up according to how much you drink on average in a week. The standard drink referred to here is about the size of one of those small glasses of wine, or a can of regular beer. The graphs show how the risk increases as you go from no alcohol to 5 standard drinks a day. And the shape of the lines show you that anything other than 0 regular alcohol consumption increases the risk of these cancers compared with non-drinkers. So while the increase in risk is much smaller if people drink a small amount of alcohol, there's no level of drinking where the risk is not increased at all. And the effects on some cancers are stronger than others, and that's illustrated by the lines being steeper. 2 of our biggest causes of cancer death in New Zealand, bowel cancer and breast cancer, are included in this group where the association with alcohol has been definitely made. Now, this chart from the recent New Zealand burden of alcohol study just shows you how many of the cases diagnosed of these different cancers are attributable to drinking alcohol. So the dark blue bars are all of the cases diagnosed in 2018, and the light blue means that they would not have occurred if no alcohol had been consumed. And you can see there's such a vast number of breast and bowel cancers that if alcohol increases the risk just a little for these most common cancers, it affects hundreds of people. So alcohol does not affect the risk of all kinds of cancer or different kinds equally. These are the types where the evidence of alcohol contributing to the cancer is very well established. And in this graphic, the bigger circles mean there are more alcohol-related cancers diagnosed at these sites. And although the diagram is borrowed from Cancer Research UK, the pattern is very similar in New Zealand. In the recent New Zealand study, breast cancer and bowel cancer made up more than 2/3 of all the alcohol-related cancer diagnoses in New Zealand. About 1 in 8 of all bowel cancer deaths and about 1 in 8 in all breast cancer deaths in New Zealand would have been avoided if there had been no drinking. Several different pathways have been found for how alcohol manages to cause cancer. Alcohol itself can cause cancer by damaging cells and increasing the damage caused by smoking if you are smoking and drinking at the same time. Alcohol can also affect the hormones involved in the development of breast cancer, a completely different mechanism. And when alcohol is broken down in the body, something called acetaldehyde is produced, which can cause cancer directly by contact with tissues. And for cancers of the mouth, the upper throat, larynx, esophagus, and liver, the acetaldehyde comes in direct contact with these sites. Not everybody's risk of cancer is the same. You inherit some genetic differences that can alter your risk, but they account for less than 1 in 10 cancers. The rest is what happens out in the real world, and we call those environmental influences. Drinking culture is one of the environmental influences, but so is smoking, work, places that we work, diet and exercise, and a number of other aspects of your physical and social environment. Exposure to more alcohol businesses and to alcohol marketing and to lower prices for alcohol all encourage more drinking, and so they increase risk as well. So the alcohol industry is part of the environment in which we, that determines how much we drink. In addition, if people have poor access to healthcare, their chances of dying of their cancer are greater. Now, in many parts of the world, these negative environmental influences that make the likelihood of cancer even more strong are clustered in poor communities. They're clustered in colonized indigenous populations and in marginalized groups, as they are here. Some population groups experience more alcohol-related harm than others, and in particular, in New Zealand, there are large inequities between Māori and non-Māori. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, Māori are twice as likely to die from alcohol-related causes than non-Māori, and Māori with alcohol-related cancers die an average of 2 years earlier than non-Māori do. So what can we do? We need to think about, this is certainly not a comprehensive list. We need to think about individuals, communities, and the country as a whole when we think about what we can do. And at an individual level, we can reduce our consumption of alcohol. We can encourage others not to drink so much. And if you don't drink, we can encourage you not to start drinking. Some young people seem to have chosen not to start drinking as young as their parents' generation did, and seem to be moving away from binge drinking at a very young age and our culture of almost everybody drinking. So this is a very promising development, but we don't know what's going to be happening next. Well, we need to find ways to increase awareness of alcohol and cancer in communities, mandatory labelling of alcohol drinks with health warnings, and promoting alcohol reduction as a way to reduce breast and bowel cancer would be helpful. But communities also need to be resourced to find suitable ways for their own people. Policies that are delivered at a national level have the power to reduce consumption across the whole population and set a new normal. Light, moderate, and heavy drinkers are all at risk of cancer from drinking, and so they would all benefit. The reductions in consumption would reduce a whole range of other harms as well, both health harms and social harms. We have a long history of reviews and official advice laying out effective strategies to reduce alcohol consumption in this country and to improve health inequity. And there's a big financial incentive in the $9.1 billion a year that alcohol harm costs and a need to reduce stress on the health system. However, it seems that our governments fear acting on alcohol will make them unpopular with the public and draw the ire of the international alcohol industries that are very powerful in their ability to block changes to alcohol regulation. The lack of action is hard to understand, but it is a problem that we share with many other countries. The international alcohol industry is still operating as the tobacco industry is used to, using marketing that makes drinking look glamorous and fun and spreading misinformation. They're also well organised to oppose any policies that might reduce the amount we drink because it is their only job to sell as much as possible. The alcohol industries use lobbyists, media activity, and local trade organisations to influence policymakers and to influence public opinion. One of the issues we have is that there are very few rules about lobbying in New Zealand, and sometimes industry people are even invited to discuss options with the people who are developing policy. A recent survey found that 71% of New Zealanders agree that the industry should not be involved in developing government policies concerning alcohol. The World Health Organization also advises governments to ensure public policy to reduce alcohol harms is protected from commercial and other vested interests that undermine health. And so now to the headlines. I think these are, for me, the most important messages. Drinking alcohol is an important cause of cancers in Aotearoa, New Zealand, including breast and bowel cancers. Risk increases with how much we drink. On average, the pattern doesn't seem to be important. There's no completely safe level of drinking where cancer risk is not increased, and the type of alcoholic drink makes no difference. Drinking less alcohol lowers your own risk of cancer, and supporting effective policies to reduce consumption will lower everybody's risk. I want to thank the Royal Society of New Zealand for developing this fact sheet you can see here on alcohol and cancer, which is available on their website. And I will leave it there. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Jenny. I think that was an amazing overview and summary of alcohol and cancer and some really, really important messages, I think, particularly around it being the total amount. That's what's really important, and it doesn't matter what type of alcohol product. I think those are messages that it's actively tried to be kept hidden. So it's really important that we shine a light on this sort of information. So thank you so much. Next up, we will go to Associate Professor Taisia Huckle, who will be talking about alcogenic environments and some of her really, really fascinating research that she's involved in. So kia ora, Taisia. I'll let you share your screen. No.
Kia ora, just having a wee sharing, sorry. Okay, going to be all right. Can everyone
Kia
see
ora.
the presentation?
Yeah, we can see it, Taisia.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, kia ora everyone. My name is Taisia, and today I will be talking about alcohol causes cancer, yet it's advertised everywhere and easy to get. I'll also talk a little bit about what we can do too at the end. So why are alcohol advertising and ease of availability important for cancer? Well, we have a lot of evidence that the more alcohol advertising you see, the more you drink, and this is especially the case for young people. And this is really important for cancer risk in terms of drinking more increases your cancer risk. Alcohol advertising, however, isn't just about selling products. And I can't stress this enough. It is about normalizing alcohol in society. It gives messages that alcohol is fun. It gives messages that alcohol is sociable. It is a part of everyday New Zealand life and safe as well. It gives those messages. And these are not appropriate messages for a cancer-causing product. Alcohol is highly available in New Zealand and it's easy to buy. And we have loads and loads of research on this. And we know that the more available alcohol is, the more people drink. So this is obviously critical in terms of cancer risk. So what does all this mean? It means that alcohol advertising and alcohol availability are two key factors that need to be addressed to reduce cancer risk from alcohol. So I'm just going to jump in now and talk about some current alcohol advertising practices. Alcohol marketing and alcohol advertising is not really regulated in New Zealand. There are no legal restrictions. There are some content codes, and so I think it's really, really important to be able to show people examples of what is going on in terms of advertising a cancer-causing product. So I'm going to focus on marketing in social media and also some new digital platforms that alcohol companies are moving in terms of alcohol marketing. And the reason I'm going to do this is that this is where alcohol companies are heavily invested at the moment. So these are some ads that from a social media platform, from Instagram. And on these types of platforms, social media platforms, alcohol advertising is controlled by AI or artificial algorithms. Now, very simply, that means that the algorithms analyze users' platform data. They use this data to target alcohol ads to people. And I guess you could describe it as a continuous optimization process. So it then looks at clicks and likes and views of the ads, which feeds back in and refines future ads that get sent to people. So the more you look at alcohol ads, the more you will see. A critical thing about social media is that it's an almost completely unregulated space. So you do need to be 18 or over to see these alcohol ads on social media in New Zealand. But apart from that, there's no regulation. So this kind of advertising is going completely under the radar of parents. And we know from New Zealand research that when young people are online and on social media, they are exposed to intensive marketing of alcohol. An emerging trend is celebrity influencers in terms of alcohol. So we've had influencers on social media for a while now, but there seems to be an emerging and increasing trend for celebrities to either start their own alcohol brands or to be involved with alcohol brands. So this is Kylie Jenner with her new brand of RTDs. Now, the thing with celebrities is that they have a lot of followers, they get high engagement, and they have trust. You know, young people look up to these influencers, and so the potential for their influence around alcohol is great. These are some examples of what is called pinkwashing, and this is from a study called by Hall et al. And these are social media ads, and pinkwashing is essentially when alcohol products, when alcohol companies or alcohol brands get involved with breast cancer awareness raising. So what we have here, I mean, we know from the alcohol literature that alcohol causes breast cancer. So what we have here is irresponsible and misleading promotion. So I'll just read out a little bit of what some of the text is saying. So one of the ads for the vodka bottle, which is on the left, is saying, you know, introducing our breast cancer awareness pink label in support of National Breast Cancer Awareness. $1 for every bottle sold will be donated to the Breast Cancer Foundation Research Foundation. And if we look at the second ad in the middle, we can see that you drink, we donate. So alcohol companies are very active on social media, but they are also moving into new digital spaces. So some of these spaces that they're moving into are called metaverses. So I'll explain what these are. So metaverses are new digital platforms and games as well. And they are where people interact. They're 3D, they're more immersive. People go in and they interact as avatars. So very simply, an avatar can be just a digital representation of a human, of an animal, or of a Lego figure. The difference with metaverses compared to platforms such as social media, for example, is that they can be full virtual reality. Of course, they're social and interactive like social media, but they also have big online gaming features. So, for example, some popular metaverse games that people might be aware of are Roblox and Fortnite. So these are really, really massive among young people and children. As I said before, metaverses are more immersive, they're 3D, and they potentially allow for novel approaches to alcohol marketing. So we have been doing some work in the metaverse to explore what is going on in terms of alcohol marketing. So I'm just going to show you a few examples from the metaverse of what we found. So this is a screenshot of something we call immersive commerce. Now, sorry, it's a still screenshot and not a video. This is from the San Mateus tequila experience in a metaverse called Sandbox. So when you're actually in there, everything's moving. So the tequila bottle's rotating 360, the fireworks in the background are going off, there's people walking around. But the thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the QR code. So you can actually hold your phone up to that QR code and it will link you to a website where you can go and purchase alcohol. Now, this website is a website in the US. It's not a New Zealand website. But what this is showing is new ways that alcohol companies are developing to be able to sell alcohol. And you don't even have to leave the metaverse to be able to do that, to order alcohol. The other thing that we found quite a lot of, and this is just one example, is something we call virtual drinking. So a lot of alcohol companies have virtual bars where people can go and do virtual drinking. Now, this is in the Heineken Silver virtual brewery, and it's in a metaverse called Decentraland. And that's me standing there in my denim jean shorts, and I'm about to do beer tasting. And how it works is you click on the little box there that says taste beer and you go through a process where you do virtual beer tasting. And then after you've done virtual beer tasting, a little survey appears and it asks you to imagine the taste of the beer. And so what we see with marketing is that we've moved much more into a 3D and immersive space and much more into a participatory space as well, actively trying to get people engaged in the processes of virtual drinking. So as part of our study in the metaverse, we recruited some young people who were 16 to 24 years of age, and they did some what we called real-time exploration of metaverses. So a lot of them were familiar with metaverses and used them, and we just asked them when they were in their metaverses doing their thing to take some pictures of anything alcohol that they saw, any alcohol content. And so these examples here are just a couple of screenshots that two different young people sent in to us. So on the left, we can see that Absolute Vodka is in the metaverse. That is a picture of Absolute Land. I have been inside Absolute Land. You go in the door, which is the shape of the Absolute Vodka bottle, and there's bars and games, etc. inside. And we see on the right-hand side is another shot of the Heineken virtual brewery that a young person came across. The other thing that young people sent in was example of alcohol content in a children's a game called Roblox. So Roblox is perhaps, I think it's the second or third most popular game on the internet for children and young people. And most of the users are under 16. Most of the people that play Roblox are under 16. Now, I want to be clear, we don't know if this was this experience here, this bar was made by alcohol companies or not. We don't know who made it. But basically, our participant is the little Lego figure with the red hair. And they are sitting at a bar. There is a bartender behind the bar, and that the game is to drink 10 drinks. And our participant has so far consumed 5 out of 10 drinks. So what we can see, we do know in Roblox you have to be 17 years old to be able to get into these spaces, but that's below the purchase age. So what we can see is going on in these metaverse spaces is young people are absolutely being encouraged to learn, to engage in excessive virtual drinking. And if anyone's wondering why I've got the blue lines through the writing, it's because there's other people in that scene and their avatars have names. So I've just protected the anonymity of those avatars. So I just want to quickly move on to the availability of alcohol in cancer as well, because, as has been mentioned, we do live in an alcogenic environment and marketing everywhere is part of that, but so is the availability of alcohol. We have a saturation of alcohol outlets in New Zealand. And as Jennie mentioned as well, they are oversaturated in some communities, absolutely in high dep areas and in some communities where Māori live. We have alcohol in supermarkets. We have online delivery now that expanded rapidly over COVID. The other thing about availability of alcohol, as I said before, it increases consumption. The higher the availability of alcohol in a society, the more people drink. But it also normalizes alcohol in society as well. And these two things go hand in hand to increase cancer risk around alcohol. So what can we do about it? So in terms of the availability of alcohol, we can restrict alcohol outlet density, hours of sale, and increase minimum purchase age. In terms of marketing, we want to ban or strictly regulate alcohol marketing, including on social media and digital platforms. Also, if we want to reduce consumption, we really want to increase tax on alcohol. Now, I'll just talk a little bit about where those recommendations came from. So I did, over the last couple of years, some work for the International Agency for Research on Cancer, who is part of World Health Organization. And I was part of an international group of experts who got together and we spent 2 years reviewing the literature, going through the literature line by line, and then making judgments about the evidence, about which policies have sufficient evidence to say, yes, they will reduce consumption, and yes, they can then go on to reduce cancer. So that's just a little bit of background, and there is a link there for anyone who would like to go and look at that World Health Organization work in terms of policy, cancer, and evidence. It's there. So thank you very much.
Kia ora, Taisia. Just bring myself back. Yeah, your research is just so fascinating and quite terrifying as well, to think of what our young people are being exposed to, plus the saturation in their physical environments too. So I think, and I think the research you've done with the World Health Organization to now be able to say that alcohol policies can prevent cancer is really powerful. And yeah, personally, I think the pink washing examples that you highlighted as well are particularly outrageous. And I think, when we do raise awareness of the link between alcohol and cancer through things like a mandatory cancer warning label, I'd like to think that things like that would just become so totally not normal or appropriate. So kia ora, thank you, Taisia. So finally, I'll just another reminder that we will have Q&A as well. So there is that Q&A function. If you do have any questions for any of our speakers, please pop them in the Q&A box. But otherwise, I will hand over to Sarah Sneyd from Alcohol Health Watch, who's going to add more kōrero to what we can do about this problem. Kia ora, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Emma. All right, let me share my screen. One moment. All right, Emma, can you confirm that's come through?
Yep, good to go. Kia ora.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, very quickly before I go into my 5 minutes sort of wrap up, who are Alcohol Health Watch quickly? You may not have heard of us, but we do a range of things to prevent and reduce alcohol-related harm. So that's by way of promoting and providing evidence-based information, so sort of being across the literature and then being able to relay that literature to communities and explain what it means so that people can understand it and then know sort of what they can do about the information that they've been given. So that's things like these sort of public lectures by way of raising awareness. And we see ourselves really more as the fence at the top of the cliff rather than necessarily the ambulance at the bottom. So working to reduce and prevent that alcohol-related harm by kind of helping shape our environments to make it easier to have more choices, sort of in the way that Taisia and Jennie have mentioned. So that's sort of reducing the affordability of alcohol, because of course it's very, very cheap at the moment, restricting the availability and advertising of alcohol, because as Taisia really went into, it's everywhere and it is freely advertised. So that's sort of our mahi and where we sort of fit into the space here. But for the next 5 or so minutes, I will just touch on cancer warning labels specifically as one avenue of things that we can do about this issue of cancer and alcohol. Jennie and Taisia spoke about a number of different things that we can do about our alcogenic environments and then how that would then reduce consumption and reduce cancer risk. But there's also the conversation around cancer warning label. Now, a cancer warning label would be important for a number of reasons. It would raise awareness, and Emma sort of touched upon the point that very few people are aware actually that alcohol causes cancer. So fewer than 1 in 5 people are aware of that fact. But through raising awareness with a visible and clearly prominent label on our products, it gives people the information that we're entitled to, right? To be able to make an informed choice about what we want to drink or not. But more than that, when people do know that alcohol causes cancer, it increases support for those broader policy measures that we've spoken about in terms of reducing the availability, the advertising, and so on. I think the logic there really is if you know about many of the harms, including the fact that alcohol causes cancer, it's easier then to see the logic of, oh, actually, hey, maybe we don't need it to be so cheap, or actually, hey, maybe we don't need that extra liquor store in our neighborhood. Those sorts of things, those policies get more support as more people are aware of the harms. But also cancer warning labels work to denormalize alcohol. And we've heard a bit about how very, very normalized alcohol is in our society. You know, it's been mentioned a few times about it being in supermarkets, and it's easy to forget that it is an addictive legal drug. When we can buy it with our butter, we can buy it with our milk, and the packaging's colourful, it's looking great, and there's very few health labels on our alcohol products whatsoever. Now, in terms of the cancer warning label, it's already required in South Korea and soon to be in Ireland in a few years' time. But just this year, there's been this growing momentum and sort of global chatter about cancer warning labels across the globe. So starting in the USA, the top doctor there was calling for cancer warning label. And since then, we've seen similar calls in Australia, the UK, Europe, and even here in New Zealand. So definitely just this year alone, a lot more interest in why we need it and how it's important. So I mentioned few people are aware that alcohol causes cancer, and perhaps because of that, we see that there's very high support in the public for a cancer warning label. So for the first time, there was independent polling done across a representative sample of New Zealanders asking, hey, do you agree that alcohol products should have to include essentially a cancer warning label? And 66% of people said, yeah, actually, I would agree with that. So very high levels of support there for a cancer warning label. But more than that, if you look to the photo that I've included here, some of you may have seen it already. It was going around the news a couple of months ago after Guy and Espina did some reporting of it, but it is New Zealand wine, Villa Maria, with a cancer warning label on it. but not for New Zealand. So what Villa Maria are doing for their wine that's going over to Ireland, and you remember that Ireland's going to require a cancer warning label soon, Villa Maria are popping on a cancer warning label for those bottles off to Ireland. But unfortunately, that means that the Irish, drinkers of New Zealand wine are receiving more health information from those bottles than New Zealanders are from our own New Zealand wines. So definitely disappointing, but also shows actually that a cancer warning label is feasible. And in fact, some companies here are already doing it. In terms of what can we do about this issue, be it a cancer warning label or many of the other strategies and approaches that Taisia and Jennie mentioned, this is something definitely we can raise with our MPs. I think that's an option often slept on. People sort of forget or think, oh no, it's not going to be as effective. However, what we have heard is that when an MP has received an email or several original emails all about the same issue, actually they do perk their ears up and pay attention to that. So definitely that's an option available to you. But equally, there will be public consultation through the select committee process in this parliamentary term. So perhaps this year, possibly next year, for upcoming changes to our alcohol laws, which have recently been announced. Now, these law changes are not alcohol and cancer related specifically. They're more around shaping our alcohol environment. So a lot of the bits and pieces that Taisia and Jennie spoke about. What we expect will be in this legislation, it's actually quite a range of fairly technical things. However, some of the big ticket items are including making it more difficult for members of the public to have a say in matters of local licensing. So that's sort of how many places can sell alcohol in your neighbourhood, allowing hairdressers and barbers to serve alcohol without a license, and introducing age and intoxication checks for rapid delivery companies. So a huge suite of things, and the intended or what's been said from the minister about why these changes are is to sort of streamline things for businesses, so make it easy for the alcohol industry to sell their product. It's been called a loosening of our alcohol laws. So we absolutely would encourage you to have your say when public consultation opens for this. And by all means, follow our social media. We don't know when that will be, but we'll be making it known when that time does come and supporting people to have their say. And with that, I'm going to draw this public lecture to a close and hand back to Emma. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Sarah. I think that was some really amazing and practical ways that people can have their say. And yes, special shout out to the work of Alcohol Health Watch and all of the mahi that your team does. And if you are wanting evidence to support, if you're talking to your MP or having your say in a consultation, I can highly recommend checking out the work of Alcohol Health Watch. So I will just check if there's any questions. I can't see that if any have come through yet, but if anyone does have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat function. Otherwise, we might close a little early. Or did any of our speakers have any questions for each other? Oh, here's a question that's just come through from Amanda. So for Taisia, she's just saying, thank you for your really impactful presentation. And it highlights how much the resource the industry have at their disposal compared to public health funds. What would you say would be the best way to influence the government agenda on alcohol marketing?
It's a really good question. And oh, goodness me. And especially in the current environment, it's really hard. It is really hard at the moment. I mean, I've been working in this area for over 20 years, and there's, you see waves of interest, and there might be a review on alcohol marketing, and then it disappears, and then nothing happens. Currently, at the moment, we have quite a lot of industry interference and policy, and at that level and various levels that we haven't seen to this extent before, and so it's a really difficult time. The other difficult thing about it is that obviously the alcohol industry is very, very protective of alcohol marketing. That's I've heard people say they will die in a ditch over it, because that is how they give all the messages about alcohol to society and people, and keep their product from not being tobacco, basically, from not turning into tobacco. And so it is difficult. I think one really, really key thing that happened for tobacco that we haven't had for alcohol is the Framework Convention. So there was a treaty around tobacco that a lot of countries signed up to, and that really pushed them forward in terms of having good policy, in terms of banning tobacco advertising. And I really think that at some point we absolutely need to get that in place for alcohol. There was a bit of a swell and a movement maybe 4 years ago to try and get one, and it didn't happen. But that's something that just always needs to be on the agenda, because it really helped tobacco. Other than that, I think we just have to keep on pushing. And one thing that I think is really important is that we all work together on things. Opportunities are they're opportunistic in terms of when little windows of opportunity can open to be able to get some policy change or get some movement. And I think if we can all work together, that's when I've seen over the last 20 years that we can get some progress. So I'm really sorry I don't have a great simple answer for you, but I think I've probably talked for long enough.
Oh, that
Can
was
I
a great
add to that
answer.
quickly?
Yeah, please go for it.
Just to kind of talk about two different things that Taisia's kind of gone on about, but I think there's a lot that can, gone on. That came out wrong.
I did go on though, that's all right.
No, not at all. And I'm about to go on myself. So, but there's also, keep in mind, there's many actions we can do to address advertising and marketing at a local level too. So even if we're just trying to take small bites at the elephant, as it were, we can have impacts with things like liquor off-license shop frontage advertising, which we know kids do see a lot of. There's a lot we can do with our local councils to address that. But then also sort of smaller pieces to address marketing with either MPs or ministers. We do have the ability to talk about that with them, propose that they do members' bills. I think it's no coincidence that at the moment in the biscuit tin, there are so many different members' bills, all to sort of loosen our alcohol laws at the moment, but nothing really in there at the moment to provide more protections for people and communities. But that is something we are able to talk to the decision makers about, and express our concern for marketing. It might not be sort of a catch-all thing that we would like to have the protections in the national law, but it might be a small members bill to address things like marketing around schools. There's different ways to sort of, I hate this phrase, but skin the cat. But I just wanted to pop those two things in after what Taisia had said too.
Brilliant. Thank you both. Yeah, I mean, I think action at all levels. But yet, speaking of the global action we're going to need with these, with the internet being so global, and the research that you've highlighted, Taisia. Thank you. Okay, so I've got a question about guidelines, which is a great question. Any chance of the guidelines being changed? We often hear of the suggestion, no more than 14 standards per week, but we know there's no safe amount. Who wants to tackle our alcohol guidelines? Taisia?
Sure.
You might all have something to say about this.
Absolutely. Yes, our guidelines are absolutely out of date and need to be revised, and they would go down based on the new evidence that we have that's built up over the time since they were last done. My understanding is that there has been some work that's been started on that, but that has been paused. And I don't know where that's at. That's my understanding. And anyone else chip in, please.
No, same here. I last heard that it was paused, and there has been some reporting expressing concern about that industry engagement at the government levels that perhaps has led to it being paused, but I haven't heard anything further.
A really good point, that the evidence around the link with cancer is why we need to update our guidelines, because as we've discussed, there is no safe level. Oh, Matilda, great question. What are we optimistic about in this space? Jennie, do you want to take this one? You're just on mute. You just need to pop off mute.
I guess, I mean, I'm not very optimistic, to be honest, but I think we need, there are a number of issues going on in New Zealand that are not unlike the situation we're in with alcohol, which is it's a battle between ideologies, really, and how much the people who make the decisions have the welfare of the community in mind when they make their decisions. So there's that whole issue. But I think the recent polling that you were involved in, I think there's a cause for optimism, maybe. A very large part of that sample supported all the things that we support, basically, who have heard about and they've understood what kinds of things we need to do to improve the situation with alcohol. And they're supporting the policies that would do that, rather than seeing them as something to push back against that's trying to take liberties away from people, actually trying to balance, I guess, the liberty and the protection. So I think, somehow the public need to be able to get that voice heard. And it's difficult when it's not a big issue, like, for an election issue that would change the way you vote. I mean, I don't think it's going to do that for people. So it's how to get the public's voice heard now that we know that they support a bit of a revolution, really.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think that the public polling that the Cancer Society and Health Coalition Aotearoa have done that you're alluding to, is cause for optimism. Really majority support for all of the things we've talked about, whether that was banning alcohol advertising, banning sports sponsorship, cancer warning labels, as Sarah alluded to. So I totally agree. Sarah or Taisia, did you have any points around optimism in this space?
I'm a little unoptimistic too at the moment, if I'm just honest. I think I have some optimism around local alcohol policies. I think that's something I feel optimistic about. So councils still have control over making policies around that, and so far it doesn't look like that's going to be changed. I know that there's been some changes around community participation, but I think local alcohol policies, I've been talking to quite a few councils, and they seem to be very supportive of reducing the availability of alcohol. So I still have optimism about that, and I think it's great that the public are on board with greater restrictions for marketing and availability as well too.
Kia ora. I might move to the next question from Andrew Shelling. Is there cross-party support for progress on control for alcohol advertising? I can imagine some parties would not be supportive as we can't get agreement on tobacco. Did anyone want to comment on that? I mean, I think that speak to some of what you were talking about, Jenny. Yeah. Yeah. Who wants to take this on?
I think the only comment I would make on that is we know something about what this government thinks about these things, or in the way they make their decisions. But as everybody's been saying, the government in waiting, if that's what it is, haven't really had a lot to say about policy yet. And I think alcohol policy would be well down the list, but not necessarily missing from what they want to do, but just not as high a priority. So much has happened in a short time under this government that I think they have a long list of things. And it is the old thing about alcohol seems so ordinary, what's the fuss about? And of course, having the alcohol company people in the room when you're making the policy currently has got to be stopped. There may be more appetite, I think, in the next, after the election, for putting some controls on that, on keeping industries out. It's about all.
Thanks, Jenny. So I've got another question here, just thanking everyone for their work in this space. Can anyone suggest some strategies for having courageous conversations with people in my circle of influence, especially youth? Yeah. Taisia, I don't know if you have any insights from working with young people.
Sorry, could you just repeat the last bit of the question again?
Sure. So can you suggest some strategies for having courageous conversations with people in my circle of influence, especially youth?
So courageous conversations about they're drinking too much. Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, I guess it's probably about all of what we've discussed today, probably the link
Yeah.
with cancer, plus, what do we do about it as well, I'm
Yeah.
assuming. But
Yeah. I mean,
might be.
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I'll just pick up on what Jennie was saying about how young people seem to be drinking less, and that is true. That is true. I have seen. I was at a conference earlier this year, and I did see a study, and someone had done a longitudinal follow-up, and it seemed that once they went to university or went off to work, that disappeared. So they just been, drank at the same level as people who hadn't not been drinking like that. But it's still good that that's happening, because alcohol is really damaging for young people's brains. So the less they drink when they're really young, the better. And then I waffled on and I forgot what I was actually going to say. So we've been working with young people in terms of research. We haven't, we obviously don't have sort of conversations with them outside of that context in terms of alcohol. But it is really interesting. So when we do research with them and they talk about alcohol marketing, they all say, "Oh no, it doesn't have any impact on me. Not at all. No. But my kid sister, I'd be worried about her, or my kid brother." And this has been a consistent theme throughout like decades, right? So I was talking to Professor Tim McKenna, and he's like, "Oh yeah, they've been saying that for 20 years." And it's this really, really interesting thing where people don't think, it's a cognitive bias actually. It actually is, I can't remember the name of it, but they just don't see that they're affected by alcohol advertising. They just don't see that that's happening for them. They can see it might happen for young people, but they don't see it's happening for them. And I don't know, like I'm not really, to be honest, sure how to answer that question. I'm not kind of, if you could put a little bit more detail in about whether it's about helping them reduce their drinking, that would really help me. Sorry.
No, I think that's an interesting insight that you've offered anyway. So thank you, Taisia. I mean, we are out of time. There are some more really, really great questions. One on zero alcohol products, I think, is a really, really interesting issue. But in the interest of time, and I know everyone's time is precious, we will have to close it off there. So I would just like to thank all of our speakers, Sarah, Jennie, and Taisia, for your time and expertise, and everyone who's joined us today on what is quite a crazy day with the strikes and the weather and all of that. So I hope everyone takes care and stays safe, and I will just close us with a closing karakia. Kia tau turangi Māori, ki runga i ngā iwi o te ao. Kia ora, ka kite, stay well. Thank you.